If you don't already know, Pineapple Talks is all about conversations with men and women who play a part in the hospitality industry. Well, I am always delighted to bring new episodes, and in this conversation, you are going to hear from Ashley Rouse. Ashley is the founder and CEO of Trade Street Jam Co. She is a trained chef who loves to experiment with flavors and create the unexpected. From the early days of creating jams in her Charlotte, North Carolina apartment to today, where she is being featured in major media publications such as Food and Wine, Forbes, Bloomberg, Essence, and even Ayesha Curry's Sweet July magazine, it is no doubt that Trade Street Jam Co. is not your average jam. So get ready to be enlightened by the life and the story of the one and only Ashley Rouse. Well, Ashley, I want to welcome you to Pineapple Talks. I'm so excited to be able to share with you today and give you the opportunity to share some of your story, because I know that you are an inspiration to many others who want to be business owners, as well as women in business and people in the food service industry. So, before we talk about your entrepreneurial journey, I want to talk about who you are. A lot of times we want to know what it is that people do, but I want to first give you the opportunity to share who you are. So, let's begin by going back in time and share a little bit about what life was like for you growing up and maybe what some of the values are that you learned as a kid.
Sure. Gosh, life growing up, I haven't been asked that maybe ever. But life growing up was good. It was always me and my mom. My mom has been a single parent since as long as I can remember. And I just think most of my values probably centered around just being independent and strong and figuring things out. My mom is very much that person that will get it done no matter what, and never lets anything, stop her or put her down. So I think that's something that's kind of translated over into entrepreneurship. It's very much a world where you get a ton of no's and you get put down often, and you face a lot of setbacks. And so I'm pretty sure, those journeys I went along with her as a young person has kind of shaped me as the entrepreneur I am today.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I love what you said, and I wrote that down, about, the importance of just getting it done and being able to manage the no's. And learning that at an early age, I think is crucial because some of us learn it later in life and we're devastated when
Yeah,
someone tells us
yeah.
no. So reinforcing that skill, all the way through childhood into adulthood, I think is wonderful. So I'm
And I
curious.
don't think it makes it any less devastating. I just think it helps you move on quicker, if that makes sense. I still have my days where, some days I get a no and I'm like, whatever, I move on. But there's definitely days where I'm upset about it and it bothers me for, a couple days. And my mom has this saying, I think it's like you have like 48 hours to feel sorry for yourself or something like that. She's always like, yeah, 48 hours. I'm like, okay, mom. But like,
Yeah.
so it still can affect you, but I think it's just about how quickly you're able to bounce back and move on.
Yeah. So kind of thinking about like when you were growing up, what would you say was like that aha moment when you realized that I love food, I love the service industry, I love hospitality? Like when did that click for you?
I don't think I had an aha moment. I don't think I ever thought about the service industry or hospitality as a whole. It was nothing like that. I literally just watched the Food Network all day, every day, and just was super into it. And I was cooking a lot at home. My mom definitely made me cook dinner all the time. She was a working single parent. She got home maybe 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So she's like, she's not getting home and making dinner. And I've been home since 3 o'clock from school. So she always like left out a recipe for me and like left the stuff and was like, make this. So um I was getting kind of into it and getting crafty and creative with things, and like I said, I was really into the Food Network. And I think it got to a point like maybe junior year where a lot of my peers were um already figuring things out. You get this pressure definitely junior year of high school where it's like, what are you going to do? Where are you going to college? And I think a lot of my peers they sounded like they had it figured out. It's very important to say that, because you always think people have it figured out, and then you look back and you're like, oh, that's
They
what you're
didn't know
still
that.
like, yeah, it's like that's what you're doing. That was not what you said, or like you're not really doing much. I don't know. So like they definitely didn't have it figured out, but they seemed like they did, and I didn't. And so I just remember kind of finding out what culinary school was around that time. And I think I had like a home ec class or something like that. And yeah, I think the teacher was like, oh, there's culinary school. And I was like, oh, what's that? You can go to school for cooking. And so I started looking into it, and I was like, well, I do like this, you know what I mean? So I kind of just fell into it. And I started like testing out the waters and telling a few people like, yeah, I may go to culinary school. And everyone was just uber impressed by it. Like everyone at school, the economics teacher, not economics, sorry, home ec teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she, I'm sure if I had an economics teacher, they would be impressed too. Everyone was so impressed with it. It was a newer like concept, right? Like a thing that was just becoming, it wasn't as trendy and cool as it is now, but it was just becoming that. And so, yeah, everyone was really impressed. My mom thought it was a really good idea. And so that's how I fell into it. I was like, okay, well, I kind of think it's cool. Everyone else thinks this is cool. Like, this
Yeah.
sounds like something fun. Nothing else had piqued my interest more than that at the time. So,
Mm. Ah, I can relate to that from the hospitality point of view, because like you, when I was, that junior year, I was stressed out because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and nothing like seemed to work. But as soon as I heard the word hospitality, like it did something to me on the inside.
yeah.
It was like the word that I needed to hear. And yeah, so I'm with you on that as well. So you end up making your way to Johnson and Wales University. How did you eventually get to um, choosing and selecting that university versus another school?
I think I had done a little bit of research, and the top two options that I had found were CIA in Chicago and Johnson and Wales. And then Johnson and Wales obviously had a couple different campuses. But so I remember going to do, like where you spend a couple days, you spend the weekend there, you check out the campus. So I did that at both locations. I'm from Chicago originally, and that's where my family is. So I actually assumed that I would end up going to CIA.
Uh,
Um,
Assumption.
but yeah, and I went there, and I enjoyed the campus. I had a good time, but I went there first, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like it. And then I went to the Charlotte campus of Johnson Wells. I didn't really want to go to Miami. No particular reason. I just, I wasn't really feeling it. It seemed a little bit far from Indiana, where my mom was. North Carolina seemed kind of in the middle.
Mhm.
And then I went and checked it out for the weekend, and I loved it. It was all about a vibe, like I had a good time at CIA, but it was something about Charlotte, the city downtown. It felt small enough that it was still quaint, but big enough that I still got like a city vibe. And I just loved it. It just fit. And I was like, this is the place.
This is the place. This is the
Yeah.
place. So, talk a little bit about what your time was like as a student there. So we know it's a vibe. We know it's this trendy big little city. But just in terms of like classes and your experience as a student, kind of how did that start shaping your career path?
Um, I mean, it was very different. It's very different leaving high school and going to college. So I think it was definitely a transition for me. Um, Classes were fun, but I had culinary labs that started at 5 a.m. So that was a really big transition for me. I also had a roommate who had classes that started at like 9 or 10 a.m. So she was always like staying up late and playing music and, having people in the room. And so it was like kind of hard transition initially, doing those early classes. I also am an only child and had like never had to share anything ever. And so having a roommate and suite mates was not as fun for me as some of my friends later made it out to be. So I didn't enjoy that part of it very much. I did not make it very long in the dorms. I moved out before the semester was over, or the year was over. I think by January.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
You
think
like,
semester.
I've served my time. I've done it. Like,
Yeah. I get it. Semester starts what in like September, right? And
yeah.
I was out by January. My mom came into town, and I was like, I can't do this. And yeah, so I moved out to my own apartment, which changed everything for me. It just made it better for me. Like I said, I had really early classes, and
Hmm.
school work was very important to me. I was like a straight A student coming out of high school, so like academics were important, and not having to get up so early and not being able to be well rested, and not, all that was just a bit of a challenge. So once I got my own spot, I was much happier. Classes were fun. Culinary labs are always fun. And then it was a great transition getting out of labs and going into like the kind of business management side of food service. That was a good transition as well, learning that. And being able to kind of dress up. Johnson & Wales has you dress in like professional wear,
Tire.
which was
Yeah.
a change for me, but I got into it. It's cute to dress up. You're like,
Yes.
this is cute. So it was cool to get out of the all white from the lab, and getting
And
into
and not
that,
smelling like food.
and not smelling like food. I mean, yes, that's a big you can't go anywhere after. You have
Yeah.
to go and like shower and change because you smell like French fries. It's like no matter what you cook, you smell like French fries. But no, it was fun. It was a fun few years there for sure.
That's cool. I'm glad that you had those great academic experiences, and all the things that you learned. Um, and so kind of want to speak a little bit on that, the personal side. So, what would you say were some memorable personal moments? I know we talked about dorm life and living on your own, but were there some other connections and relationship that were able to develop during your time at Johnson & Wales?
Yeah, I mean every bit of it, everything, every relationship I developed. I grew a best friend that I still have today. Um, all of my career relationships were built during that time. I mean, I learned everything about having a career and like being in the workforce. That you might have like your summer jobs in high school, but when you're like in college and you're working, it's a different thing. So I learned a lot there, met a lot of great connections in the culinary world that I still talk to today. And of course, I met my husband, my now husband. So that's probably the most important and most memorable relationship that I built while I was there.
Love it, love it, love it. So now let's kind of go on the career trajectory. So you got this great foundation, you made some great connections. And so now you're like graduated, and it's time to like build a career. Um, I want to first maybe know, did you know when you graduated exactly what you wanted to do? Um, or were you still trying to figure that out too?
I woke up this morning still trying to figure out, like, what do you mean?
Yeah,
Of course not.
yeah,
I honestly think God has kind of put my footsteps like right where I needed to be this whole time. Like, I mean, my whole life, obviously, but like leading up to this, because there was so many times where I just had no idea. Like, even when I went to culinary school, I had no idea. Like, sure, cooking's fun, but like, I
yeah.
had no idea. And then, throughout college, I was working in restaurants, in different hotels, like always just these kitchen jobs, like because that's what you do, right? You work in the kitchen, like you're in culinary school, you work in the kitchen. Um, but I will say over time, I grew to hate it. And I think, I think it was a combination of two things. I think it was one that I had really shitty bosses um, who weren't professional. And I knew even at a young age, like, this is not professional. This is not the type of environment I want to be in. especially being a woman in the kitchen, then it just is like, it wasn't common. You weren't treated as highly as maybe like a man was, you know? So I think between my bosses and some of the environmental things, I think I just learned to not like it. And then also the hours, like, and you're on your feet all the time. So I was working, 10, 12 hour shifts on a regular basis, which was new to me. And then if there was any special event or something going on, it was 15, 16 hour shifts. And I hated it. I worked at a hotel, hotels never close. And it feels very much like that. It feels like your shift never ends. It feels like you can be called in at any time. I worked every holiday, night, and weekend for years. And I never had consecutive days off. Who does that? Who
Yeah.
does that?
Yeah.
I'd be off on a Monday and a Thursday.
Yeah.
No weekend. None of my friends were off. I couldn't visit my family I had no family in Charlotte, but I couldn't go out of town to visit because I had these broken up days off. So over time, I really just grew to dislike what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I think, to answer your question, when I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do because I was very confused about, do you love food as much as you think you do, or is this not for you? And I had a kind of a moment of clarity. My mom bought me this book. It was like 100 Careers in Culinary Arts. And I remember reading it and being like, oh my God, what is food journalism? Like, what is, like learning about all these other things I could do other than work in the kitchen. And it was just such a pivotal moment for me because I felt refreshed. I was like,
Yes.
wait, I do love food. Like, I had a blog. I was like cooking and taking pictures all the time. And it was like, wow, I can still love food and be a part of this without standing on my feet and being in the back of the house. So yeah, it was kind of like a full circle moment.
Yeah. I love that your mom popped in at the right time with what you needed to, like you said, to provide that clarity. And as you were sharing, I started to think about, there are people who may be interested, like in a food service, culinary, and hospitality career, and they only see that side that looks exciting and looks glamorous, but then there is that whole other side of the standing on your feet and the long hours. And so I'm glad that you were transparent about that side, so that they walk into this decision sober-minded and not, based upon an illusion or a fantasy of what they think being in this.
Oh yeah, I feel like it's my duty. Like my husband's always introducing me to like some young sweet person who wants to be in culinary, and he's like, oh, do you want to talk to them? And I'm like, are you sure you want me to talk to them? Because I'm not going to necessarily sway them into doing it. Like, I'm going to be very honest with them. And it's hard. I will say it's hard to be in the food industry. I don't know if I would say it was hard, but for me, I couldn't see being where I'm at without having gone what I went through. And so I say that to say, you probably can have a successful career in food without having worked in the kitchen before, but why would you, right? It well rounds you. You have to understand, you have to make the food and work the hours and be there to really understand, and I think even appreciate what you're doing. And so I will tell people how miserable it can get. But I will also say, but if this is what you want to do, then you got to go through. You got to do it. And I think it's crucial,
Yeah. I had one experience where I was interning at this private club, and it was neat because we got to go in all the different departments. So, everything from membership events to like being in the kitchen. And so I had this experience where I decided to burn my 2 fingers in order to save 10 scallops. And I was like, after that, for me, that was my confirmation that I don't like, the kitchen is not where it's at. I will cook at home, but full-blown restaurant, no, I'm not burning any more fingers to save anything.
Look, it's rough. It's rough. And it is not glamorous. And I used to remember trying to have my hair look decent like after I would get off. And like, I mean, I feel like only a Black woman could understand this, but like, I had a relaxer at the time, right? So I was always like, my hair was always like straight and like looking pressed out and really good.
Yeah.
And you'd sweat it out during your shift. And so like, I didn't want to put it in a ponytail because it was like straight and nice. And then like I would try to wrap it underneath my like little chef hat,
The
but then
heat.
it'd be wet because
Yeah.
it's like sweat, which is
Yeah.
gross. And it's like I could never, and then like people would want to go out after, and I'm like, what do I do with my hair? Like throw it in this ponytail? I mean, and I was like, I was so cute in college. And so I was just like, what do I do with my hair? And my nails were never done because you can't have nail polish on. So, I had to get rid of my, beautiful fake long nails. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'll keep them short, just polished. And they were like, no, no polish.
Yeah.
And, you're not wearing any makeup at all. And I felt like I lost some of my like girliness,
Yeah.
being in there. So that's what I mean when I say it's just definitely not glamorous at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. So that kind of, in a way, sets the tone for your transition into entrepreneurship. And so kind of as we talked about in the very beginning, like you were doing something now that a lot of people want to do, and that's, own a business and to, essentially control and manage their own schedule. So again, like we talked about being in the kitchen and there's that glamour side. So I want you to kind of share the joys and then even some of the challenges, but start first by sharing the beginning. How did you launch your company and how did the idea come about?
Yeah, well, it wasn't just a straight transition like from back of the house to entrepreneurship. I first had to leave from being in the back of the house to being like a chef, right? Like an executive chef. So I had all this experience. So I had to move to being a chef. And then after doing that, I moved to being in the front of the house, right? But I had to have the experience of being a back of the house manager before I could be the front of the house manager. And so I did that. And that kind of got me out of the kitchen. Once I did that, I enjoyed what I did more and I found more time to myself. And so that's when I started kind of jamming on the side some more and like, doing more hobby things that I liked, right? Because I didn't have that time before when I was in the back of the house. I had no time, like free time to myself. So once I kind of had made that transition into the front of the house and started enjoying what I was doing and having time to do things, I was jamming again. I started like an Etsy store, started like selling the jam on Etsy, just to do something as a hobby. Like this was the first time in my career. Gosh, at this time, it must have been 10, 10 years of working,
Okay.
almost 10 years of working in food, maybe 8 years or so, of working from the back of the house to being a chef to being in the front of the house, and like putting in my due diligence. So I just think that's really important to say that it wasn't just like, oh, I don't want to be in the kitchen anymore, I'm going to start a business. Like it
Yeah.
takes time and a lot goes into that. But so yeah, then I started kind of just jamming as a hobby, put it on Etsy, selling it on the side. And that's how the business started. But I was always, like I said, I had a food blog when I was working in the kitchen. So I was always going to the farmers markets and getting stuff and cooking and preserving things. And that's how I was like really starting off with making jam back when I was in college. And I lived on Trade Street, which is where our school is located. And I lived basically across the street from school, in an apartment on Trade Street. And so I always thought like, oh, I should have a company called Trade Street Jam Co. And so at this time I had moved to Brooklyn, New York with my husband. And so I remembered that I had wanted to call it that. And that's kind of where the inspiration started. So kind of how the business came together.
How it came together. Wow.
Yeah.
So you guys have this expression, and I love it, not your average jam. So what would you say makes Trade Street Jam Co. not your average jam?
Well, everything. It's very different than your traditional like Smuckers or something like that you'll find on the shelf. The flavors are different. I definitely wanted to set out to make something that you haven't seen before. So I didn't want to do like a traditional strawberry grape. I also thought if I ever grow this thing, like why would you want something the same, right? Like what's going to make it stand out? What's going to make people buy it? It has to be different and trendy and cool, which is very much, I'm a product of this environment in Brooklyn, right? It's all about trends and being cool. And so wanted to do something different. So the flavors are really kind of unique and unconventional. We don't use a ton of sugar, which is also pretty unconventional for jams. Wanted to be a little bit healthier, obviously, and also just I was on kind of the earlier side of the trend of like nutrition and health and like healthy snacks and everything like that. I could see that that was a, I've always stayed up on food trends, and I could see that that was something where everyone was going towards, is like these healthier focused items. So definitely want to do less sugar. So you're going to find 3 to 5 grams of sugar in ours, where most traditional
Wow.
jams might have 15 to 17 grams per
Okay.
serving. So super clean label, funky flavors. And then the texture is very different because we don't use a ton of sugar. So it's much less viscous than regular jam, but it makes it really good to mix into a cocktail or to use as like a syrup drizzled over pancakes or waffles, or as a pan sauce over roasted meats or veggies. So all those things just really from jump made it a very different item than most people had seen.
Yeah. So with that being said, it sounds marvelous. It sounds sweet and savory and just like totally perfect. But I know that everything doesn't always, all the details of life don't flow perfectly. So I'm curious to know what were maybe some of the pivotal experiences that you had, like in the early days of launching your company. Maybe what were some challenges and what did you learn?
It's hard to even answer that. I have so many challenges every single day. Um, I think, gosh,
I know it's
starting
like
off,
the
I
biggest
mean,
struggle. I don't know.
I know people always ask like, what was your biggest struggle? I'm like, are you kidding? This week? Or
Struggles, plural.
yeah, yeah. But I think some of the struggles starting off, I mean, I had no idea what I was really doing. You know what I mean? And like,
Mhm.
yeah, I know how to make jam. Like that's great, but that's not what builds a business.
Yeah.
And so I think just the lack of a lot of business acumen
Hmm.
was a big struggle. I just didn't know what made a great product other than the taste. Outside of the taste, I didn't really know much more than that. So I didn't have that. I remember being like, oh, the next step will be getting into stores. Like, let's get into Whole Foods. And like, that was like a 3-year process of trying to get into Whole Foods before they actually said yes. Um, and so that was a big struggle, right? Getting all those no's. And I was like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
They have a section for new trendy products. Like, why is my product not there? And then like understanding the back end of like what actually goes into that, and case packs and all these things I just didn't know. I think that was probably the biggest struggle, not knowing anything. And a lot of people will start a brand by ideating for years on what the product's going to be, building a business plan, understanding market fit, and understanding their demographic. And then when they go to launch or go to market, they have all of this information. I didn't do it that way at all. I literally was like, here's what I like. Let's make it fit into the market. And it's a very backwards way of doing things. Doesn't mean you can't succeed that way, but I do think you can potentially face more challenges and problems
Yeah.
going that way, right? You don't know if the market wants your product or needs your product. Is there a demand there? So I just think that was probably the biggest struggle early on. It's just not knowing anything. And then also thinking my demographic was someone that it wasn't. I think that was a big struggle too. I wanted my demographic to be these young hipsters,
Yeah.
young cool people out in Brooklyn, because that's what I was, and that's what the people around me were.
Yeah.
But so targeting them and not seeing the success I wanted to see was a big learning lesson, and it took probably at least a year of
Wow.
targeting the wrong demographic before I realized like just because you want those to be the people doesn't mean they are the people, and that's fine, you know? So, yeah.
That's a life lesson there, just period.
Right, right.
Attention to what is and what isn't working, and to not force your agenda, because all you're going to do is end up being sad and mad.
But
So,
we do that, right?
yeah,
We
yeah.
force agendas all the time. I
All
don't know why we do that when the writing's right there on the wall. And for us, it was, you know, my husband would help me. We would sell jam at these markets, like on the weekend, like these craft markets. And the markets we were going to were just like all these young, trendy people. And they were like, oh, this is cool. They wanted these Instagrammable moments. So that's why they would go, but they wouldn't buy. They would just
yeah,
go and post it and share it and taste it and talk about it, but they wouldn't purchase.
right.
And we kept just thinking, what are we doing wrong, you know? And it's like, we literally just, someone mentioned a different market in a different area that was like families and kids, and we tried it, and we were like 10 times more successful in
Yeah.
one day than we had been in like a year at this other market. And it was like, why did it take us a year of being at this market to not think like, maybe these aren't the people for us? And you know, but it was a learning lesson for sure.
That I'm telling you, that lesson across the board, that speaks to relationships, that speaks to everything right there. Okay, so, and I'm glad you answered that, because I was going to ask you, who did you find end up being your audience? And so I'm glad you guys found your tribe, you found your people. So that's really good. And now, we talked about like the challenges, but what were some of the pivotal positives and like opportunity moments that just really like set the tone for, more and more opportunities for you?
Um, we we got into Bon Appetit magazine, which was a big thing for us. It's a big foodie magazine. And I had worked at the World Trade Center at Condé Nast, right down the hall from Bon Appetit, for many years before I left to do the jam full time. And I had spent so much time trying to like send them jam and like be like, oh, you guys like this, it should go in the magazine. And it like, and I had friends there, and I was like, oh, share this. And they were so sweet, but it never got anywhere. And it's funny because the week before I quit to do this full time, we actually got into the magazine. And it was so funny. I literally was like sitting in our coffee bar, like having an afternoon coffee, and the editor of the magazine like walked by, and I had like, I was familiar with who he was. We've talked before. And I just flat out was like, hey, like, how do I have a product that's really dope. Like, how do I get into the magazine? And he was like, oh, here, email this person. And I was like, great. And I emailed her, and she wrote a story, and it ran like in 2 weeks. And it was like, it was just funny because I had tried so long, and just a simple 5-second conversation for me not being afraid, and just
Yeah.
like, just ask him, you know? But that was a big moment for us because it's such a big foodie magazine.
Mhm.
And I remember we got like maybe 300 orders overnight. And to date, I mean, 300 orders, I probably online orders, I don't know, I probably had that in months, like in 6 months or something. And so to get it in one day was really, really big. So I remember having jam all over the living room floor, and having my husband try to help me with these packages, and being crying. I remember crying and being overwhelmed, but so grateful. That was a big deal. And we gained a lot of customers from that, you know, and it gave us some credibility, which was awesome. So I think after that we would get some good PR, and they would be like, oh, and you were featured in Bon Appetit. And you know, so it's like you need to
It's
get
a
good.
lever of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, it's like, how do you get one? But once you get one, then you start to get more, and you can say, oh, we were in Bon Appetit, and you can use that as leverage. And then we also were featured on a show called Hustle on Viceland, and that was a big deal for us as well. It was a documentary about New York businesses, entrepreneurs who were trying to make it, and we were the first episode on that, and that was bigger than we thought it would be. I mean, like, we were like, this sounds really cool, and we did it, and we had to wait like a year before it released, so we had kind of forgotten about it, you know. And then it came out, and it was like, it was crazy. We got crazy orders after that. Still to this day, people order and leave us a note and at checkout that says like, "Oh, I saw you on Vice," or people say it to me all the time when I'm out and about. But it gave us like our 5 minutes of fame. I remember I was in LA at this like food hall, and this guy was with his mom, and I'll never forget. He was like, "Mom, oh my God, it's her." And I was like looking around like, "Who are you talking about?" And he was like, "It's the Jam Girl, like it's the Jam Girl." And his mom was like, "Who are you talking about?" And he's like, "Don't even worry about it. It's the Jam Girl." And he was so excited to meet me. And I just remember being like, "Man, I was in NYC, like this, I'm all the way in LA." Like, it reached a lot of people. It reached people worldwide because we just started getting orders from France and all over Europe. And it was just really exciting. So yeah, we've had some really fun, some really high highs.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. That is wonderful to hear. So let's kind of speak a little bit about the jam process. You take these funky ideas that you have, and then how do you get them from there to the jar?
I mean, I get in my test kitchen and I test it out. I've been very lucky. Usually I like dream of this flavor and then I test it and it's good and we try it out. It usually goes there. When we used to sell a lot in person in markets, it was a great way to test new products because you get that firsthand, response from a customer. You get that feedback right away. So I would test out new things all the time. Now it's a little bit that we're bigger. It's a different process. I still will test it in my kitchen, but we're going straight to market with something at that point once I think it's good. So, sometimes we'll do surveys and get feedback from our customers, or we'll do stories on Instagram and say like, what do you guys want to see from us? Would you be interested in a hot sauce? Like all these things just to try to get some feedback. But yeah, then I'm coming up with an idea, narrowing it down, testing it out in the kitchen, testing it a couple different ways, just to see what tastes best. And then we're running a small run of it, which is probably, if it's a jam, smallest run is probably 350 jars of it. So, we're running it and then we're selling it and we're seeing how it goes. If it sells quickly, it's popular. If it's not, it's not. But you do have to give things time to get out in the environment and people to test it and try it and love it. And so it's a process. It's definitely not like we try it, didn't work, so we stop. We have to market it properly. We have to put out recipes for it. We have to do videos and reels of me like making something with it and my team making something with it. So it's a whole process. It's not as easy as it was before. I used to just innovate all the time and put out, 10 new things a year. And now it's maybe 2 a year and you got to plan it probably at least 6 months in advance. And even that's probably pretty tight, probably more like 8 to 12 months in advance.
I think that's very insightful, because from, I guess, the person looking in, things can appear to be like, oh, they're just, just on top of everything, and it look fluid and flawless. But behind the scenes is a lot of preparation, a lot of time, a lot of thought that's put into it. And so I think that's encouraging, because there are people who are working towards something, and then there could be that feeling of like, I'm not moving fast enough, or I'm not getting things done. But to almost just to stay the course, to do the work, because once whatever it is ready, once the jam is ready, it's ready.
Yeah. I mean, the entrepreneurship is a whole lot of standing by and waiting and staying the course. Like that's literally what it is, and you just have to learn that over time. I think I thought when I really launched it, or when I left my job to do this full time, that we would be, famous or rich or something within a year, and it's just has not been that. But like I said, there's been some really high highs that have kind of taught us that this is the right path that we're on, and we're walking in our purpose, and so to just keep on walking.
Yes. So one more question, as far as the operating of Trade Street Jam Co. is related to your team. And so, what has your role and your responsibilities, how's that transition been from going from a one woman show to like actually having a team? Like what was that process like, and how did you start to bring people on board to join you?
It's been a very long process. We probably hired most of our team over the past year, but I mean, I've been wanting to hire for, we've been around 6 years, probably for 5 years. So it's a really long process. I've done every single thing in the business for the past 5 years. Um, but we started with interns. That's a really good way to go. And I can't think of it. My husband asked me the name like 3 weeks ago, and I'm still blanking. But there was a company I found out about that allows you to hire marketing interns. I want to say it was like $100 for 3 months of an intern. And someone told me about it, and I was like, yeah, I'll try it. That's super cheap. It was the cheapest thing I had heard at the time. And so I got an intern for 3 months, and she helped me with, I believe, social media at the time, which was really great. It was a really good experience. So I stuck with that company, I think 3 more times, and had these short-term interns. One helped me like onboard us on a Pinterest and start pinning. Like, we weren't familiar with everything Pinterest. So she helped us with that. That was one of her specialties. And so I will say interns are the way to go if you're looking to hire like as a small business, and you can't afford to hire full time. Interns are just the best. You can get unpaid interns, you can pay an intern, but unpaid is great. You can go to like local universities and colleges and find people who are majoring in if you need a social media, then find a university that has a strong marketing major, and you can reach out and you can even post on their platforms, or reach out to professors directly like via LinkedIn and find a marketing person. We recently had a supply chain intern. I didn't even know supply chain was a major like in school. And we found someone. Actually, my virtual assistant did all the work and found the person for us. So that's a virtual assistant is a great way to go, because you can usually find someone affordable who can work on anything, virtually, any kind of project. So it was a lot of like interns first, then the virtual assistant who started helping with customer service, like answering our customer service inbox, which was helpful because I had a lot of emails coming in. And now she helps with any project. But really our team now is just built from a bunch of contractors. We don't have a ton of full-time staff. It's contractors. So we have like a legal team, a Black legal team that's amazing. And they're kind of per project basis. We have an operations team that is a contracted team, and they're like per project. My social media manager is amazing. We finally hired her like full time, but she was working as an intern through that company first. And then I was like, look, I can't pay you. Your internship's over. I can't afford to pay you. But if you want the experience of like learning with the startup and being in the food industry, and she was like, I absolutely do. This has been great. So she worked for me for a couple years, and then we finally hired her. I have an email marketing specialist who does our newsletter, which generates a ton of revenue for us, which is great. So yeah, it's been a process over years, but I will say the hustle, the show we were on, we got a ton of people reaching out who wanted to work for us for free. Wow. Which was so amazing. That's how this is like a God-led business, because he has brought all that to us. And so my email marketing manager and my social media manager both worked for me for free for like 2 solid years.
Wow.
For free, and like put in work.
Wow.
Which is just like I used to pray, like, I mean, I still do, but I used to pray like, please don't let them leave. Like, please, because they're so good. And I started letting them I started giving them the reins on things. And so I was like, please don't let them go. But yeah, it's been a process, but I'll say start with interns and then just build up from there.
Yeah.
But you got to get help. Like, you'll get burnt out, overwhelmed. And then I say the point where you start, for a while, you're able to manage it all, right? It seems like a lot, but you're still able to manage it all and everything's going fairly smoothly. The moment that you start dropping the ball on things that you weren't dropping before, is the time when, and hopefully you hire before that, but that's really the time when you have to be like, okay, this is too
Yeah.
much for me. I
Yeah.
need help.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That was very crystal clear. So I'm sure whoever is going to hear or watch this, they've got steps 1, 2, and 3. So thank you
Good.
for sharing that.
Thank you.
So every year has its ups and downs. And obviously 2020 and 2021 was unique for everybody because we all lived through COVID-19. And so it definitely affected like every industry. So my question is, can you share a specific example of how your company was affected by the pandemic?
Well, the pandemic was actually really great for us in 2020,
Okay.
because people were stuck at home and
Mhm.
they were cooking and experimenting and baking, and they were spending their dollars on specialty food items that they maybe wouldn't have bought before. So our sales went from, I think at the time, early 2020, we were doing like 3 or 4 grand a month, to June we did 80 grand. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, and
Like, I don't
by
know, what
no,
is that percentage? That's like,
I think I said 300% the other
yeah,
day, and I was like, I don't think that's right, but
wow.
it was a lot. It was a lot. Now, obviously, a lot went into being able to maintain and manage a business that goes from 4 grand a month to 80 grand a month,
Mhm.
almost overnight. So that was a lot. I also had a baby in June, the same month that we went to 80 grand. So it was a very
Yeah.
hard time. I look back and I still sometimes when I talk about it, I get very emotional about it, because I don't know how I made it through. I don't know how I gave birth and fulfilled enough packages to bring in $80,000 of revenue. We were still fulfilling our own packages out of our apartment at the time.
Mhm.
uh, and so it was a lot. But it was great, it was good problems, but it still was problems for us. And then I think by November we did $100,000 in the month. And so it, it it was very good. It was just a lot of challenges. I will say I had spent years building up my operations and making sure that they could sustain growth. And so while I didn't expect the growth to look like that, not overnight anyways, we were prepared.
Yeah.
So I had put the processes in place. We just had to expand and like grow, but we didn't have to build,
Yeah.
which I'll say is huge. So I'm always telling people, prepare in advance. I always prepare in advance. Like, even if I'm like, I'm not ready to hire, but I'm writing a job description over on the side because I know at some point, and then when it's time, I already got it, because I'm like, I've been waiting for you.
Yes.
And I've literally built a business on that, and it's been very helpful. So that really, otherwise we wouldn't have made it. We wouldn't have made it at all. We would have fell through. The website would have been shut down. I mean, it would have been crazy. Um, so 2020 was great. 2021 has started to level out a little bit.
Mhm.
And it was also spent fixing some of the mess that 2020 created. So yeah, it's been a roller coaster, a big roller coaster, but I will say all of entrepreneurship has been. So, I'm kind of used to the highs and the lows.
Yeah.
And 2020 taught me how to really just kind of try to stay as even keeled as possible. My husband is very, very even keeled and calm, and like stays just like, right in the middle. And it's very helpful because I'm not like that. I'm very much have these highs and then have these lows. And so
Yeah.
between him and 2020, I've really learned to kind of just mellow out somewhere around the middle,
Yeah.
and understand that it's all, it's all going to work out fine.
Yes. Yeah. So, I kind of want to ask you about, how you're managing personal and your entrepreneur life. And you did kind of touch on it a little bit. So, as you were sharing, I was reminded of this book called Atomic Habits, and it's by James Clear. And so in the book, he really challenges readers to not just set goals, but to have systems. And you were talking about having a system in place. So he said that goals are great for giving direction, but systems are good for making progress. So I know that you are leading this thriving company, but you're also living as just a woman. You're living as a wife and a mom of one, and it's soon to be two. Never mind the fact that you're a sister, you're a daughter, you're all these other things. So, what would you say are a few goals or systems that you put in place for yourself so that you can deliver as best as possible for these varying roles that you're in?
Yeah, I think, well, for the business, I have one big goal, which is to sell this company for $100 million in the next 5 to 10 years. I usually say five. I'm trying to give myself some time, but let's go with five. Um, so that's the big goal for the company. Personal goals are to just be the best version of myself that I can be, and be the best mom and be the best wife that I can be. And then as far as systems to get there, personally, it's just spending time, being able to separate from the business. I think early on, I went through probably a couple years where, before my baby got here, she probably forced me to step away. But you know what I mean? I spent a couple years there where I felt underwater and felt very overwhelmed and consumed by the business, and I couldn't step away, and my husband would say, like, we're not talking about Trade Street tonight. And like, he'd get home from work and I'm like, hey, like, today this person emailed me, what do I do, like, how do I, and it was like, okay, we're not going to do this every day. So the systems have been to spend time to build structure. My husband and I still meet about Trade Street, but we have a meeting once a week, and so I try to keep a running list of notes for that meeting and not really overwhelm him too much in between that, about the business. So that's the system. Spending time with my baby is a system I put in place, and spending time for myself. And then for the company, just little steps, little by little, hiring here and just focusing on the processes I said that we've built, focusing on looking ahead, and just taking these little steps sometimes when it feels like a really big picture, just being able to kind of take off a little piece at a time, because the picture's not going to get any smaller, but little by little.
Little by little. I
Yeah.
love that. Little by little. Um, so we're, pretty much approaching the end of this interview and conversation. So we've talked about the thin phase of your life, your origin story, how you became who you are. We've talked about what's happening now. And so I want to kind of peer over into later. And what would you say is just maybe next for you? So I know the goal is to sell your company for $100 million within the next 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
But, how about beyond then? Like, what do you want to see happen for yourself beyond, maybe even beyond the company?
Sometimes I can't even think about, like, tomorrow, just I would like to, one, take some time
Yes.
for myself, but also give back. I think that's a big piece of the company, is giving back, whether that's knowledge, resources, funding, whatever it can be. So I'd love to build some scholarships, maybe for women, minority owned businesses, do some master classes. I'd love to do some of that for free and just, like, share the knowledge that I felt like I didn't have access to when I was building this business. Um, do some charitable stuff. Making PB&Js with leftover jam and handing them out to the less fortunate. I think a lot of time will be spent giving back.
Beautiful. That's the perfect way to end. So I just want to say thank you for this time. And I can't wait for others to hear your story, because there's lots to learn from you and lots to be inspired by. So
Thank you so
okay.
much for having me.
You're so welcome. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Talk soon. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share Pineapple Talks.